Welcome back to the One More K podcast. We're on episode number 26. This is the number one podcast for anything business and ultra and trail running. We are excited to be back on the show. We have, of course, here, my name is Marcus, and we have Ned all the way from Singapore this time. Good evening, Ned.
Oh, well, Marcus, it's almost morning for me because I have spent the last half an hour. One day, as you said, Marcus, you are full of love and patience for my inability to connect. So
Endurance running has gotten me more zen, so that's good news here. And special guest on the show is Valentin Orange from La France. Good afternoon, Valentin.
Hello, guys. Super happy to be finally in the podcast, and very good pronunciation of my name.
Merci beaucoup. This is going to be a show where I can show off my French a bit. So let's see how this goes. But people actually don't know this. I don't know if even Ned knows this, but Valentin has the first ever guest on the show. He was the episode number 0 for the One More K podcast. So back earlier this year, I tested everything with an episode of Valentin. And so I remember you were sitting in the jungle somewhere in Asia still, and we recorded the One More K podcast, episode 0. So I'm really, really, really excited to have you back on the show, basically, but officially the first time. You are one of my best friends from the trail running world and in general as well. So super cool to get you onto the show. We have so much to talk about your running life, your documentary life, your life in Vietnam versus now in France, which is an exciting country right now. But who does not know you, I just want to give you a quick introduction, of course, what you have achieved so far on the running side. You have pretty much won every single race in Vietnam the last few years, whether it's Dalat Ultra Trail, La An, Vietnam Mountain Marathon, Vietnam Trail Marathon, Vietnam Jungle Marathon, Hanoi Ultra Marathon. The list goes on and on. I was never able to beat you, unfortunately. There was one race where I was doing the 100K, you do the 42K. But yeah,
we actually never
raced against each other. That's very true. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I went on to do a business, and you continued to stay a great runner. So that's why our path kind of diverged a bit. But
well, Valentin, just to say, while we've never met, we have something in common because Marcus has never beaten me either.
That's true.
That's great.
We haven't raced. Actually, not true. He did beat me in a 5K, but I ran 100K to start. So
that one, the famous one.
It's a different race on that. There's 2 different races, 100K and 5K. They're not connected. Yeah. No, but I think it's great that Valentin has done amazing things in Vietnam. And also, I was about to say, has, of course, then also raced internationally. So it's not just Vietnam. You've been part of many races in Southeast Asia, a lot of them also in Thailand. And since you moved to France, you've been getting more active also in France. I think notably last year you came 32nd at the UTMB CCC. That's been your great race, really a great breakthrough on the French international scene. And this year we have you doing again CCC at UTMB, right?
No, I'm doing the big one, UTMB.
Going to the 100 miler. Okay, here we go. That's exciting. On the news docket today, as usual, at the One More K show, we cover some news. However, this week is kind of a quieter week, and we are in between Western States and Hard Rock. Of course, there were many races going on in the meantime, but on my side, there was not much to cover. Ned, anything on your news docket you wanted to share?
Only a little bit of sadness in that Zach Miller looks like he's out. So Zach and Francois were going to be racing at Hard Rock. I'm a Laz, as everybody knows, I'm a Lazarus Lake fanboy, but I'm also a Zach Miller fanboy because I'm very old. I didn't live at the same time as Pre. I mean, I did, but I didn't follow him. But I think Zach Miller is the Prefontaine of ultra. Not only the long hair, not only the moustache, but the front-running, balls to the wall style. I adore. I think it's hard not to root for Zach. I think it's hard not to, wish him on when he was leading Jim at UTMB last year. Nothing against Jim, apart from that horrible documentary. That was horrible, Jim, but nothing else against Jim. I desperately wanted Zach to win. I think Zach, and I've just his In Search of Zach or whatever it is from Billy Yang. So I was super excited because, again, Valentin, you're from France. I love Francois. I think he seems like a great dude. I think Zach would have taken him down because Francois is coming back from injury. I think Zach may have won, but from what I saw a week ago, he had a burst appendix, and they said maybe he can race, but I don't think he's racing. Is he? Is he officially out?
On his Instagram, which was posted, I believe, 2 days ago, so Sunday, so we're recording on Tuesday, that he was still saying he has not officially withdrawn yet. He's still on the list. He keeps it at some.
I think it's going to be hard after surgery. I mean, Zach's a tough mofo, but I think it's going to be hard after surgery to be heading out into hard rock. So yeah.
Wishing him a speedy recovery. That is a bit of a bummer. That's true. Yeah.
Do you think so? Maybe a question, not news, but we don't often do this. Let's look forward. We can all take a guess. What place overall does Courtney come?
Valentin?
Wow, that's a tricky question. I wish she would be on the podium, overall podium, because she deserves it. Like, she's being so close at like La Diagonale des Fous last year or 2 years ago. She came second at UTMB 2 years ago, and I mean, I'm pretty sure she can be on the podium.
That would be pretty cool.
Top
Marcus,
3 as well. Yeah, top 5 but now Zach is not running, so maybe top 3.
Can you imagine? As so I used to do Ironman. It was called getting chicked. A lot of guys are going to get chicked, that's for sure.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's exciting. Hard Rock coming up. Another small race, by the way. We just talked about it before recording. It's 150 people, we believe, in Colorado. So another high-level, super elite race, but not many runners starting. Pretty cool. Yeah. Unlike other races that have been happening. But before we come to UTMB, Ned?
I have one more update. So I'm going to do a guy I know quite well, Salomon Westin, who one of Hong Kong's best runners. He had trained for a 140-kilometer race, which was shortened. I'll talk about it at the end in a little rant. But it was an interesting super talented guy. Like, Valentin, you're a super talented guy, kind of out of Asia. I know you're not originally from Asia. It's always interesting to see how expat runners in Asia do. Salomon had hoped to come top 10 overall in the 140K, but it was shortened to a 60 because of a storm. And Marcus, I'm going to do my drop and my rant at the end about that situation. And then he came 25th because a lot of the speedier runners were in the 60, or some people from the shorter race came as well. So, it was, I was quite excited because I thought Salomon had a real chance to be top 10. And, the fact that you were 32nd, I think as Marcus mentioned, Valentin, maybe just to ask you, what do you think is the reality for maybe the expat runners? Because I know we've talked about the kind of OG, the actual runners out of Asia, Hal Harns and Meyer and Stingray. But for guys like yourself and Salomon, what do you think is the reality as you come to European races?
Well, obviously it's tough because of the competitivity here. Like, it's much more competitive. But I think we have a great advantage because of the weather in Asia. We are more used to like chaotic situation conditions. We are more used to jungle in general. Like, it's a great training for like rolling or runnable terrain because we know how to run on the jungle. So basically, when we are in the mountain, it's an advantage. But in the meantime, we are not used to altitude because there is no much races in high altitude in Asia. So yeah, I mean, for me, in my case, it was hard when I did a few races in Europe back from Asia because the competition was so high and I was not used to be passed by overtaken by a lot of runners. So yeah, but it really depends on the skills as well, like the natural skills.
Makes sense.
How would you compare the race quality, race organization from Southeast Asia to Europe?
As I always say, races are mainly in Vietnam. I will compare Vietnam to Europe because I'm more experienced in races in Vietnam. the organization is always like super well organized. It's always like big races, a lot of runners, big ceremony, big what is it? What is the name of the village?
Expo.
The expo. It's always super impressive. Like I did some races in Vietnam that has a bigger expo than not UTMB, but main races in France, and this is impressive. Um, Vietnam or Asia in general, they have the taste of like making things very big. So I think that's the main difference.
And in terms of safety and like checkpoints, how would you compare those? Because there's always a big topic about safety and checkpoints.
Yeah, mandatory gears. The list is always very small in Asia, also because of the climate. You don't need like second layers. You don't need. You just need a rain jacket basically and life blankets. But I think races in Asia are much more flexible because they don't have any official regulation from the government or anything. So that's according to their regulation, their own regulation. So they do basically whatever they want. So yeah, in France, especially France, because if you compare France and Italy, is very different. Italy is much more flexible. In France, the list is always like super big because of the insurance, because of all the risks. They don't want to take any risks, so they just want to be covered. So yeah.
Did you ever read? So I'm sure you know who John Kelly is, the great John Kelly, coming from backyard films. He's such a nice. Like I've chatted with him before. He's actually Marcus. Don't know if you know, but he runs a tech startup, and Janesh, our mutual kind of friend, colleague, person, Janesh invested, and he introduced me VC. Anyway, so John Kelly comes from Laz's backyard. He's always very gentle, but he once wrote about the compulsory gear you need for races in France or Britain. He's like, and in one of the races, he needed a spork. You know what a spork is? It's the spoon fork thing, right? You should have heard him right about. He's like, I don't need a spork. Like, I don't need one. I'm not taking it. Of course, he had to take it, but it was that reality. I think American races as well have less mandatory gear, whereas in Europe, that reality of mandatory gear is a big difference. But it was I'll see if I can find it. We can put it in some show notes or whatever. It was hilarious, just the difference. So I'm sure as you find, Valentin, not just the jungle, but the reality of the gear list is totally different.
Yeah, but I mean, from that perspective, yeah, I completely understand, and I don't like to carry too much weight and especially things that I don't feel like necessary. But in the meantime, we have a lot of accidents, especially in the mountains. We also got some very bad accident in Asia. So we also need to think about the not only the elites or the front runners, but also the pack, and they spend much more time in the mountain. If they get stuck somewhere, they have to. But I mean, yeah, it's always a debate because some people they definitely don't need that much gear.
Yeah.
And then in the US, it's more interesting because they give the responsibility to the runners. They're like, okay, there's no mandatory gear, but just that's your own risk. So just take what you feel like necessary for you, which is also
Very
great because yeah,
cultural, very
yeah.
cultural aspect here. You lived in Hanoi, North Vietnam, for many, many years. Take us through your training routine, and especially how did you train in a city of 6 million people with 6 million scooters and how many millions of cars? Because I lived there with you, and I want people to understand how you trained in Hanoi versus now in the French Alps. I think the contrast cannot be more crass.
Yeah, from a 10 million people city to a village, like 300 people village with more cows than people actually. Um, so the funny thing is that I started to run in Hanoi. So my running journey started in Hanoi. So for me, that was it. That was the place where I started to run. So Hanoi is very flat. There is not even 1 meter elevation, nowhere. So I was running basically on On weekdays, we call it Banana Island, which is like a land along the Red River, which is not really an island; it's more like a peninsula where there are trails. So that was the only place where you can find trails, which was very nice because it's in a big city, and it was very close to my place. So I was running there every day, and so just for try running, and then to get elevation, I was going to a place called Soksan, which is the first mountain, the closest mountain, which was 45 minutes by motorbike, 45-minute drive to from Hanoi. So I was going there once or twice, or sometimes 3 times a week. It was very exhausting because I had to drive in the traffic, in the dust, in the heat.
In the cold, and people don't know this. Hanoi gets very cold in winter, so you have to wear 8 layers on the cold. There's a very famous ride I did with Valentin on the back of his motorbike. I did not prepare well for the ride. I was coming with only 3 layers, and I froze my freaking beep off. Yeah, and it was so cold. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Saxon was great. We had great hills, not mountain, but hills. We could do easily 1,000 to 2,000 meter elevation within like 30K, 40K. So it was okay. I think it gave me some kind of um, not discipline, but it gave me a bit of mental strength because yeah, it was hard. I had to wake up very early. I had to go there on my own, drive, and then come back, run 3 4 hours, and then come back. And I was super exhausted, but I loved it. And yeah, that's where I trained most of the time. So yeah, that was. And now it's almost paradise because I live in a village where there's mountain everywhere. Now I can do 1,000 meter elevation gain at my doorstep. So it's just a big contrast, as you said.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think you're probably very grateful now for what you have, having been through your Hanoi experience. Now you have the runner's paradise, very close to Chamonix, right? It's not far away from the French Alps. Mm. Mm.
And when you started, so I've heard a lot, I've seen a lot about what you've done with your running, heard a lot from Marcus. What made you start running in Hanoi?
Um, I I was former football player, soccer player. I used to play football for many years, and then I started to travel 10 years ago, and obviously it was more complicated to play football. So I naturally shift to into running because running was the easiest sport to do, and I also when I was playing football, I was also running like sometimes because I loved it, and then yeah, in Hanoi, I remember I was there. Like I moved there in 2015, and after a few weeks, I saw that there was a half marathon, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I like to run, so let's give it a try. And then I did it, and I did it in 1 hour and 31 minutes, which was
What?
great. Yeah.
What?
Um,
Let's go.
so and then the funny thing is, I always tell this story, but the funny thing is in the race kits that they give you before the race, there was a flyer. There was an advertisement for Vietnam Mountain Marathon, and at that time, I've never heard about trail running. I didn't know what was trail running, and I was like, okay, there is like 100K, 70K, 42K, 21K. I was like, let's do the 21K with a bit of elevation. But then eventually I signed up for the 42K. It was like 9 months later, so I had time to train, and that's when I came to Soxton for the first time, and then that's how my trail running journey started. I remember it was like 42K with almost 2,200 meter gain, and I saw the cutoff time was like 16 or 17 hours, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna run maybe 14 hours, 13 hours. I was so scared. Then I made it in 6 hours, so it was
Did you
easier.
win?
No, 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 no. I came in maybe 20-ish position.
No. So, but 131 on your first half. I mean, that's That's pretty solid. Were you surprised?
Yeah, a little bit because I had no idea what was a good time. I just asked my friends back in France. They were doing a bit of running, and I asked, what's a good time?" And they say, "Oh, 1:45 is good for a first one." I was like, "Okay, let's go," and I just went like normal, and I mean it was very hard. I was like completely destroyed and everything, but yeah, I pushed hard.
That is, I mean, that's a. It's funny, you find everyone kind of find. Obviously, you played a lot of football. You were good at that, obviously, but people kind of find a sport. I wonder, if you turned up and done 2 hours 30, which is, no shame for people who've done 2:30, but that probably doesn't lead to where you are today, which is, a highly competitive runner. That first race probably told you what you may not have known, but it tells a lot that you.
I
There's no
mean,
surprise you're as good as you
yeah,
are
yeah,
now. So,
maybe that was a long time ago, but I always knew that I had like good endurance because when I was playing football, I was the lazy one that was able to run for 90 minutes. But I was my teammate, they thought I was lazy, but I was able to run.
It also runs in your family, and your brother is also a very good runner. So I think both of you are a bit like the very strong brothers running in France. So there might be some genes who help.
Yeah, maybe.
Alongside running, and you have also developed a big passion for the camera, and you have always been in the certain tourism industry in Vietnam. And so then I think you developed more of a passion for taking pictures and also doing films in the sports industry. And I remember that with Leca, we had a lot of great photo shoots to take pictures of and take videos of actually many of our athletes. Take us through the journey of developing your passion for outdoor sports, landscape filming, and picture taking, especially in Vietnam and now to France.
Yeah. So I started to take photos and videos in 2017 or 16. I bought my first camera like 15 years ago, but I didn't know how to use it. So I was using the automatic mode and I was taking pictures. But I always liked to take pictures, and then naturally I learned and improved. And then at some point, I realized that it could become a job. And whenever I was working, wherever I was working, I was suggesting that I could make video to the company I was working, and then that's how I started to improve. And then um, when I came back from Vietnam the first time, I moved back to France and I came back to uni to study tourism, and I had to do a few internships abroad, and I worked for a few travel agencies in Brazil and then in Myanmar and then in Vietnam again. And so those travel agencies was looking for photographers and videographers. So I was an intern, but I was the one who was creating contents. That was a good deal for them because I was obviously cheaper than a professional one, and that was also a good deal for me because I could improve in beautiful landscape, beautiful places. So that's how I started to work as a photographer and filmmaker. And then after that, I opened my company, and obviously I was working in the tourism industry because I had a lot of contact. And then COVID happened. No tourist for 2 years. In the meantime, I was running. Running became a passion 10 years ago. So naturally, I switched from tourism to sport and outdoor sport and trail running because also I had good contacts in the trail running industry, and races started to contact me to ask me if I could cover the race, make some highlight videos and everything. And then that's how it happened actually.
It's so cool to have been following your journey once with you, because I remember you were still in the tourism industry when I met you, and now you're really into running. And I would always call you the Billy Yang of Vietnam, because you are really the one to follow for anything running in Vietnam. Switching to the latest, however, which I think is a breakthrough for you, was to have been releasing your documentary of Sangye Sherpa. And I was hoping to talk more about that great documentary, which I watched again just last night and this morning. I think your best film so far. Sangye Sherpa is an individual we should all follow. There are different ways of taking the conversation right now, but again, how was it? How did you land that job with Sangye in the documentary, and what was it like to film this very unique Nepalese runner, Sangye Sherpa?
So the story is interesting because it started in February 2023. I went to a race called Amazon Jungle by UTMB as a runner. And I happened to be sharing my hotel room. I was invited by the race organizers, and they put me in the same room as Sangye, with Sangye. I knew him because he's a famous runner in France and in general, and I was super happy to be sharing the room with him because I had the chance to get to know him. And then we spent the whole week together. He was running the 100 miles, I was running the 100K, and then after our race, we spent some time in the room, started to talk late at night, and then he told me his life story. He was very emotional. He was even crying because he has a very emotion, like a very how can I say, sad youth and very sad life story. He was born in a very poor village in high altitude in Nepal, and he always wanted to see the world, so he lied to his mom and took the little money that she had to go to Kathmandu by bus. It took him 3 days, and then he arrived in Kathmandu. He didn't have anywhere to stay, so he slept on the streets, and then he started to learn how to be a porter. So he went to the Himalaya, he became a porter, and then he became a tour guide. That's how he learned French from the tourists. Then he got a sponsorship from the Alliance Française in Kathmandu because he was a good student. And then he moved to France for an internship, for a 3 months internship. And then he decided to stay in France. So he told me this story late at night. He was crying. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I asked him, like, is there anyone who ever did a video or documented film or documentary or whatever? And he said, no, never. I don't really tell my story to anyone. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Like, if you want to do it, we can do it. And then he came back to France. I came back to Vietnam, and then a few months later, I went back to France for a few months, and I contacted him again, and I said, "Do you still want to do it? I can. That could be a personal project. I can follow you in Besançon where you live, and then I can follow you at one of the race you're running, and then make a small video." He said, "Yeah, let's go, let's do it." So I spent a week in last summer with him in Besançon at his place, and then we went to Eiger Ultra Trail together. And then in the meantime, his sponsor Kelas, a Chinese brand, heard about this project and decided to finance this project. So that gave us the chance to go further and shoot in other places, and more especially Nepal. So I went to Nepal in November for a few weeks, and we went hiking. We went to his village, and that gave like a boost to the project and the documentary, because at the beginning it was just him in France, and then interviews, and then a few running footage to like a how many months was it, like 8 months of shoots everywhere in the world: Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Nepal, France, Switzerland. And that became like the biggest project of my career. So yeah.
I mean, and look, I think it is great that you did that documentary, and particularly with such a story. I've spent a bit of time in Nepal, and the reality is It is the most beautiful country with the most beautiful people, but it is desperately poor. And I think it's in the 10 poorest countries on earth, right down, unfortunately, at the bottom. So it's great that people like this are, you're doing documentaries. The reality is, for athletes today, they're not making a living from prize money, really. They're making it from brand and content, from filmmaking. I'd love to hear your view on that, because look, clearly you're a talented filmmaker. Did Sanjay realize how important this was? Because without it, you may have heard Zach Miller talking recently that Zach's dad is like a blue collar worker, and when Zach told him how much money he makes, and a lot of it is from content, his dad couldn't, because his dad's old, couldn't wrap his head around. He's like, "But I thought you ran." He's like, "No, I do, but I have to tell my story." And he's like, "So what? You're a storyteller?" He's like, "No, I'm a runner." So look, you're the storyteller now, Valentin. Did Sanjay know, and what is your view on how athletes should tell their story?
No, Sange is too laid back and old to understand that. Sorry, Sange, no offense, but he doesn't know how to use social media. People like him. He's super popular just because he's himself very natural, posting pictures like with no sense or no caption, or sometimes it's cut, we can't see his face or anything, but people love him because he's super natural and he's super open, and whenever they meet him they feel like they are friends. Like I've met so many people that whenever they bump into Sange, they're like, "Oh, do you remember me 10 years ago, this race I was running with you next to you, or I give you a banana at set point?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He remembers. Sometimes he doesn't remember, obviously, so he pretends. But he's like this, like he's super friendly, so people love him. But back to the social media and content creation. Obviously, he knows that he has to create content because he's not making money from even the sponsors. Uh, he got invited by the organization sometime. They cover travel expense sometime, but most of the time it's his own money, and he doesn't have much money because he has to work beside running. But it's very interesting to see how, like, what the example with Zach is very interesting, because if you take football, for example, those players, they are paid for playing football. They just need to play football. Now they are having Instagram or anything, but if they just play football, they will get enough money to live. Trail running is a minor sport, so you can be the best trail runner. If you don't have Instagram, if you don't have social media, you cannot make money out of it. So you cannot be paid just to be running. You have to promote a brand, you have to promote something, a company or anything. You have to highlight something. That's very interesting. That's good for us, because now every single elite, they have to have one photographer and one videographer at any race they're racing, because they have to run, but they also have to show that they're running. So that's very interesting. And it's very new. It's been like what, 4 or 5 years, not even 5 years. Yeah, it's post COVID that we see that every single runner at UTMB, the top 50, they have a photographer and a filmmaker.
All of the top 50 would have a
Maybe
photographer.
maybe not all of them, but most
But
of them. Most of them.
wow. So, as I'm sure Marcus knows, you're definitely younger. I'm 57, and I started surfing when I was 20-ish, and we went through the same thing at surfing. They couldn't take their own content, but you needed to be front cover of Surfer Mag. Like, you needed that. But we couldn't create, and the pros were like, "Oh my God, that one shot on the big wave." And today, it's still on my Instagram feed because I love surf. You see the amount of people who are just living through content. And you're right, for trail running, there's not enough money at this. So when you released a documentary for Sanjay Sherpa, did he understand? I'm sure he understands, but did he use it? Did he use clips and small parts? Has it helped his brand?
Not really. I'm the one who create contents for him, not officially, but I give him photos and everything, but he doesn't know how to make content on his own. So He uses my picture sometime, but if I don't do anything, he will never ask for anything. But it's I mean, we're still at the beginning of the we haven't released it yet, so we have done only 2 premiere in his own not his hometown, but where the city where he lives, and in my hometown. So that's the very beginning. We don't really know where we will go. We know that we're going to share it on a paid platform called Uptrack, which is a streaming platform specialized in outdoor sports. And we will do a few screenings in France, in cinemas in France. But beside that, I don't think Sangue knows how to make money out of, from that documentary. That will mainly help him to tell his story and maybe attract more sponsors, but that's not for sure.
I feel like every week now there's a documentary being released about a race, a runner, an athlete. And some of them are fantastic, like yours. Others are just very cheap branding exercises like Hoka and Jim Walmsley. So sorry, I don't know. I had just a bit of a rough coffee right now. But that's great and that's fine. But the first question is, for you as a filmmaker, do you make enough money from this? Like, is this a growing business for you? And where can you take it?
So definitely there's space for filmmakers, especially in that industry. From the outside, people always feel like there's nobody who can run with follow the runners. So from my side, I see a lot of not competitors, but like colleagues. I know a lot of people in France now. They do great content. They work with big brands or big athletes, like famous athletes. But it's still a few people, and so that's why I think there's like enough space for other filmmakers. Also because there will be more and more sponsors, more and more brands coming in the market, looking for contents. So I think in the future, in the next few years, there will be much more runners followed by filmmaker photographers.
But you have a unique skill. You can run with the front of the pack, and you know how to use a camera properly. There's not many people who can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to run too much actually. It's always like a few hundred meters to 1 kilometer, let's say. No, the most complicated thing is meet them on the top of the mountain, carrying all the gears, wait for them because sometimes it takes like hours, and not being tired, and also being happy with it, because it's extremely exhausting. And if you're not passionate about trail running, you will never spend hours and hours or nights in the mountains. Last year, my biggest project was I made a documentary on Perrin Fage, who is ultra endurance athlete who did Tour de Glacier, 450 kilometers. So in Aosta Valley. So 450 kilometers, 7 days. So that was me and another photographer, a friend of mine. And we followed her. We met her once or twice a day up in the mountain, up to 3,500 meters altitude, sometime in the middle of the night. Sometime we like in the middle of the day, and then we had no sleep, or and then in between we had to go back to the van. We were staying in a converted van. We had to sleep, we had to eat, we had to shower. It was hard, and then I had to edit one Instagram reel every day, highlight reel. So I had to edit as well. So we had to find electricity, everything, and I did that for 7 days. And I don't think that a normal, like a wedding photographer, a wedding videographer would be happy to do it, because it's tiring. But I loved it because I'm passionate.
I think it is. So my brother is a photographer. He's older now, stopped, but he was a wedding photographer for a while, and he was like, "Oh my God, this sucks! Like if I have to take one more photo of one more smiling bride that I don't want to do, and he was just doing it purely for the money. And he did other photography that he enjoyed. So maybe to the question, is it really competitive? Obviously, Mark has called you the Billy Yang of Vietnam. Obviously, Billy Yang is the king, really, of trail. And there's other people who make films. I must admit, I'm a huge. Do you know Wandering Fever? The people who did. I mean, to me personally, I think Wandering Fever. What's that South African guy's? His movies, the one where they ran through the Himalayas, was just unbelievable, and Transamericana as well was unbelievable. Is it really crowded? So are you competing, apart from the brand names, Billy Yang, Wandering Fever, etc., is it really crowded?
More and more because of obviously trail running now is becoming more and more popular, so there's more and more people practicing. So among those people, there are also people who take pictures and videos. But it might be my perspective because I'm in the industry, so maybe I feel like there's many people. But the other reason is that now it's very easy to buy a drone. It's not cheap, but it's cheaper than before to get a camera, like a professional camera. So yeah, it's more accessible. Like Billy Young, or in France we have Seb Montaz, who is one of the best friend of Kilian, who made like one of the greatest videos of Kilian like 10 years ago. At that time, there was no one able to follow Kilian. I mean, nobody is still able to follow Kilian, but like going in Nepal, in the Everest, and staying at the base camp. And yeah, so at that time it was much more complicated because in terms of cost, sponsors, and gears. And now there are more sponsors, the gears are more accessible, and there's more people practicing.
Which could mean we get a dilution of stories. And then the question is, how can you find and then create a unique, great story, which you can argue is a great and unique athlete. I think just from the Shanka Sherpa point of view, I can't remember too many stories of ultra runners coming from Nepal and moving to France. It's a very unique story. But to be honest with you, there are a lot of European, North American runners who, end up being ultra runners. I'm not sure the story is unique. So how can you as a filmmaker find a good story and then create a good story? Like, what are you looking out for to also preserve your name and your brand as a filmmaker, because you don't want it to have it attached to every kind of random mass market story?
It's a big issue, I would say, because now we see a lot of content, as you said, but then there are good content, great content, and then there's some tasteless or no story or not interesting. Also because the athlete is not interesting. The athlete doesn't know how to speak to the camera. Sange doesn't know how to speak to the camera. It was really hard at the beginning, and I was almost about to give up after 2 days, to be honest, because he was so shy. But yeah, it's like it's the finding, like it's hard to find the good recipe, nice story, good image, and mix everything together to create a great film. That was the issue this year I faced, because after the documentary I made with Perrine, I got a first prize at a film festival in France, one of the biggest trail running film festival in France. So some people came to me, wanted to get some, wanted to make documentaries, and it's always, as you said, Ned, you have to think about money, like wedding photographers, and you have to think about your branding, your brand, and your image, and you don't want to put your name into something that doesn't sound great, or you don't feel like it's going to be good. So yeah, it's a good question. I think I was lucky because I met Sange, I met Perrine, and they had great story to tell, and they trusted me. And the funny thing is that I met them at the same place at Amezean by Jungle by TMB, and it's so funny because I met the two people that I could create the biggest project in my career at the same place at one race, and I was not even filming, I was running. So yeah, it's a interesting question, Marcus. I don't have the answer.
I think it must be innately in use, partly. You will have people who are like, oh, you make a film, you just know it's a no, right? Like, as you said, Marcus said, you don't want to make a film that nobody resonates with. You've done it enough now. You've run enough. You can see the interesting stories to be able to do it, because, when you make great movies today, that's everything, right? It's so important. These, as a question, just slightly, the top 50, just to say most of them have a photographer. Obviously, if we leave out the Killians and the Jims who are getting it all paid for, somebody who's coming 20th or 30th, right? And not having to go at UTMB, but there's not much prize money for 20th or 30th. Are they paying for those photographers and filmmakers to be there? Or is it some kind of partnership where everyone realizes we're all benefiting each other here? The filmmaker gets content and the runner gets content as well.
Mostly brands, sponsors, hired photographers and filmmakers. I would say for the top elites, they have their own photographers, so they have like their personal photographer, and they're paid by the brand. There are also brands that hire like a few photographers, or like a production company, and they will follow every runner from Adidas, from Salomon. So they have to wait for every single runner, top 20, top 30, I don't know. They are also influencers now, and it's getting crazy that at some races we have like people top 300, 400, 500. They have one videographer, and they paid with their money from the pocket. They hire the photographer and videographer to create to make a film, just because they are influencers.
But you see it. Obviously, Instagram's not silly, right? TikTok's, I don't use TikTok, I use Insta. Because I stop at ultra runners, I get served up other ones, right? And for a lot of them, they're just creating their fame. The world is, you want to be famous? You just got to put it out there. I've mentioned this guy a couple of times, William Googe, he's also a model, right? And he's totally ripped, and he's a dude, and he ran across America. He's certainly not winning UTMB. He might come 200th, 400th, but he's got it down. He has got filmmakers and everything, and he's either at a party in Vegas or on the trails in the French Alps, and he's combining this story line. So he's doing it for his own, and he's got like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of followers. But you're right. I think it must be pretty entertaining to see all the influencers. I mean, look, hell, I'm not an influencer, but I film myself every Sunday with my crappy phone, and I put it on LinkedIn. And it for whatever it is, I shouldn't be critical, because I'm out there doing it too.
We all influence somebody, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Even if it's one person, it's called influence. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see that now. And it's okay, trail running, we talk about trail running, but we can also speak about other sports or other activities. Now with social media, whenever we do something, we have to record it. Professionally, amateur, I don't know, but we have to document. We have to have a proof of like what we did. And the trail running is a very good example, because now like people who do training for big races, they will document it, because they know that it will make people interested, and yeah, you have to feed the audience.
Is there any athlete or any story that you would love to capture? Any like wish list that you have? And whatever you say here right now usually manifests itself in the future, just letting you know. So it's also a bit of a prophecy that might come true. So try your best.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit cliche, but yeah, I would be super happy to work with Kilian, obviously, or at least meet him. There are brands that I would love to work with, like Salomon, for example. It's like on the top of the list for sure. Even if now I I'm friend with people who work with those brands, and in reality is not what you expect. Like it's sometimes they don't pay much, or sometimes they are not well organized. So since I'm working in the industry and I'm close to some athletes, I know the backstage, and I have less dream than before, I would say. But yeah, I mean, obviously Francois, for example, but those athletes, I guess he is going to Malaysia to race. What's the name of the race?
Cameron Ultra.
Ultra. So yeah, like those athletes, they have already many films about them. There are two people that I would love to follow and to document their story. Is Ludo Pomeray, the legend. In France, we call him the legend.
The man who never ages.
Yeah, exactly. It's like wine. It's getting better.
Getting better.
So we got to know each other because we ran together at Dorinton by UTMB for a few hours. So I wanted to document his hard rock because he's racing hard rock this year. He spent a month in America. He did hiking and then running the Ontario loop. So I wanted to document his hard rock, but it was too expensive, and the sponsors, there was not enough sponsors. And then there's this guy, you probably don't know him, but you should remember his name. He's a friend of mine from my hometown. His name is Yannick Noël like Christmas. And this guy is a very good example because he's a baker. He works in a bakery. He's one of the, let's say, top 20 in France, or even in the world, top 50 ultra runners. But he's on social media, but he doesn't know how to use social media. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to post anything. And because of that, he's not famous. He came third at Lavaredo last week.
Wow.
After Hannes and Tom Evans. He's number 3. 910 UTMB index.
Wow.
He came third at TDS last year. He came fifth or fourth at La Diagonale des Fous, but nobody knows him. Nobody knows him because he's not on social media, because he doesn't post anything. And I wanted to make a documentary about his, because he's racing UTMB this year, and I'm sure he's going to do top 5. But he doesn't want. He said, no, I don't think people are interested. Oh, I don't think, he is too shy, too humble. And yeah, that's a pity because his story is nice because,
I hope you make it happen for these guys, because you're right, not everybody's used to posting. And if you can help tell their story, that would be amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, but he doesn't want.
The last question from my side, how much does doing business in the sport take away the fun of doing the sport?
Funny thing is that this year I'm racing less, and I'm super happy with it, because actually it's nice also to be not to be racing and to be capturing. I love making good images. I love creating contents in beautiful landscapes. It's a bit cliche to say that, but I'm okay if I'm not racing, Sometimes I'm happy to go in the race and having like the media pass and following the race from the outside. And sometimes I'm happy to be racing because I train for this race and I can choose the race I want to race. So now I feel like I have 2 hats. Sometimes I'm an athlete and sometimes I'm a filmmaker, and I'm very, very content with it.
And last question from me before we round out the show. If you could recommend to somebody just one trail ultra film to watch, which one would it be?
The one about Jim Walmsley, the one they follow his UTMB last year. No, I'm joking. What's the name of Summit of My Life from Seb Montaz, when Kilian wanted to climb the Everest, or Unbreakable.
Of course.
Classic.
I am such a sucker. I mean, me and Marcus talk about storytelling the whole time. It's super great you're doing it, man. And look, still running, And maybe one last question, then I'll do my drop, and then I have to run. You're running UTMB? Do you have a goal? Obviously, the goal. I must admit, I don't like it when it's to finish. I think you can finish miles. Do you have a goal? Place, time?
The secret one, yeah, it's. I mean, we all know that first UCMB is always hard. We always start too fast, too excited, no experience. But I would be super happy if I run around 25 hours. I have no idea if it's doable or not, but if it's less, it would be fantastic. If it's more, it's okay. I haven't studied yet the course. I mean, I know the course, but I haven't studied the time yet. So yeah, but yeah, 24, 25, 26.
Wow.
I don't know.
I'm a believer of putting goals out there. I wish you luck in it, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck. I'm excited to see you actually in France. I'm coming to see you and support you. So I'm looking forward to that after a long time. Thanks for joining the episode, Valentin. It's been great to have you officially on the show and to get all the insights from filmmaking, trail running, France, Vietnam, storytelling. I'm so excited to follow your journey even more. I'm sure there's more to come. You are raw talent yourself, so I'm sure that we're gonna see many more documentaries coming from your camera. So thanks for this 1more K episode.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I hope it was interesting. That was very pleasant to chat with you. And yeah, if you want to see my films, there will be 2 films on Uptrack streaming platform. This one, Contre la montre, which is time ticking, about Perrine Fage, is already online, and then the one about Sangay Sherpa, A Life of Challenges.
We'll put it in the show notes, and we will put it also on our social media channels to promote that for sure. Thank you for this. Now we're handing over to Ned, who is going to give us drop, and is probably not a drop of wisdom and inspiration. It's going to be a drop of a rant. So I can't wait to hear it. Ned, over to you.
Well, thank you, Marcus. Like last week. So last week, my statement of intent failed. I didn't do a drop because I'm unorganized, as people know. I am doing my 200K this week, starting on Friday. So I will be doing it this week. No excuses, full stop, going out. But this week I wrote something that came. So I mentioned at the beginning of the show that my good friend Salomon Westin had traveled to Verbier to run the 140K. Can't remember what it was called, but a race aiming for top 10. So I just want to be clear, because it took me a while to explain to Marcus my rant. So I want to be clear what my rant's about before I put it into a drop. So the race was shortened from 140K to 60K. And my rant is not about them shortening the race. They shortened it because there had been extreme rain and lava flows, and the course was closed. I get it. So I'm not ranting about that. I mean, I don't love it. They could have done something else, but it's not what my rant's about, right? Salomon sent me a note to say, oh, damn, the race is... But he understood. It's fine. So I read the official notice of the race being cancelled. And it was the biggest load of absolute corporate garbage I've ever read, right? There was no heart, no soul, no feeling. It was like you were getting a refund for a tin of soup. You went to the supermarket slightly off. Like, there was no care. Like, now, I don't want to crap onto UTMB. This is UTMB. You're doing a great job. We love you. Keep going. Just write it. Don't let the corporate lawyers write your statements for you. Look what happened to Spring Energy. When Spring could have got on top of that and said, damn, we're sorry. So UTMB, I have written, next time you have to cancel a race, I have written your note for when you have to shorten a race. This is what I think you should write. This is my little drop of how to cancel. You don't like it? UTMB, it's totally cool. All right. It's called Dan. Dan, we are brokenhearted. For you and for us, a 140K race has to be a 60K race. Nature is too powerful and we can't beat it. We also haven't been able to find another route in time. The former, nature, we can't help. The latter, we can, but we didn't. We are sorry we can't fix it. 60K isn't nothing, but we absolutely know it's not the 140K you came for. The route is blocked. The lava is flowing. The rain is torrential. We know you're tough. We know you can handle it. We know you want to go out there with all your heart, all your soul, and all your training. But we can't lose any of you. We love you, and we love the sport too much. The FAQs can do the FAQ thing. But what we want to say to you is how sorry we are. We commit to making it back to you. Our sport is wild. Sometimes you win, sometimes it does. As frustrating as it is for all of us, this time it won. We are truly sorry. Ned.
Thank you, Ned. I think you're making a very good point of how race organizers can also do a better job in storytelling and having an authentic voice. I think that's what it comes down to speak the language of your target audience.
Like you like it sucks. I get it. Like it sucks. Like it sucks. It was just that the corporate statement was like, "We are sorry to inform you, la-di-da-di-da, on." Like, and they have to shorten the race. You know, we've had terrible tragedy. No one wants to die doing this. But this, you know, say it like you mean it. Anyway, so there we go. Storytelling is everything.
I think that's exactly the theme of today's episode is how to tell stories, whether it's a race, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a brand, whether it's a filmmaker, who will hear many more stories on this podcast. I'm excited about more shows to come. Stay tuned for episode 27 next week. We're on a roll. So until then, join us on social media. Give us your feedback. Thank you, Valentin. Thank you, Ned. Thank you for everyone listening. And merci beaucoup. À plus.